All right, it looks like we've got a few people who've dialed in. Fantastic. I'm super excited to see you. Um, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And if I can get a thumbs up or a comment in the chat that says you can see my screen, that would be fantastic. Let me open up this. I can see it. Thank you, team. I appreciate that. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm excited to see some of our folks that are here. I'm loving that people are dialing in. So before we get started, tell me, where are you visiting from? I am curious. I want to know where our lovely participants are dialing in from. I'm in Utah, and so is Kim. We're in different locations, but I see Teen from Chicago. Woo! Welcome, Teen from Chicago. I'm happy to see you. Seattle. Loving Seattle. That used to be home for me for a minute, so that has a warm place. Well, it has a rainy place in my heart, and the Seattleites will understand what I mean when I say that. But as you're dialing in, get comfortable. Grab your cup of tea, your cup of coffee, your ice cold water. I've got my water. Grab your scone. Midway. Love it, Dana. I'm always so excited when I see you on my calls. That just, I love it. I love it. I love it. I am thrilled to have you here for the regular session of Chat with the Chief. What is Chat with the Chief? I see some new faces and I see some faces that are familiar. So welcome to everybody. Chat with the Chief is a monthly series that I thought would be great to get folks to have a conversation with Chief of Staffs or people who have proximity to the Chief of Staff office. Just a casual conversation so you can get different perspectives. How are people operating in this role? How do they find success? What are some of the challenges? Are you acting as a chief of staff and you don't have the title and you're going to be listening to these things and saying, wait a minute, those are some of the things that I do. How do I step into that role? And so that's what this is. This is just real conversations, real people doing the work. And like I said, I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm going to switch slides. We don't have a lot of slideware, but we have a couple. This one is really for the folks who are new to me. The folks who know me, they're familiar with the stuff. You're all old hats with me on here. I wrote a book about being a chief of staff. I am grateful at the response that I received to this book. And being a bit of a trilogy geek, I'm going to write a trilogy of books. So I've started my second chief of staff book. Be looking forward to that. That's going to be coming out soon. And then I also wanted to give you a little bit of perspective into my background. Why me? Why validates me to be able to do this kind of work? Well, I've had an opportunity to work in multiple industries, and I wanted to share with you just a snapshot of those industries. Edmunds, the car people. I've been in entertainment with Disney, technology. I kind of date myself with Netscape. Loved working at Netscape. I was at Apple for a little while. Currently celebrating 10 years at Microsoft this month. Spent some time in the nonprofit space, healthcare, so Intermountain Healthcare. And I also worked at a startup, real names. They're not around anymore, but for those of you who worked at a startup, you know that that's the thing that happens sometimes with startups. They're here, and some of them are able to thrive and be successful, and some of them not so much. And so that was an amazing experience for me. So that gives you just, again, a little bit of a view into my past, who I am. And then I'm your host. So if you've joined me before, you know that I'm the Chief of Staff Architect. I have over 15 years of leadership experience. I love learning, so I'm always trying to get certified and a new credential, so I have a new perspective or a new vision. So I hope for you, you do the same thing. Continue to learn, continue to find ways to upskill and uplevel yourself, not because you need the validation of the credential, but because you love to learn, because you always want to stretch. And I've pioneered the Chief of Staff Academy. For those of you that are curious, I'm going to drop a link right now in the chat that you can connect with me if you want to learn about the Chief of Staff Academy. It's the first of its kind hybrid approach to coaching and learning. So a little bit about me. But now for the meaty part. This is what you're here for. I am excited to introduce you to Kim Casey. She is a master in the finance space and in the technology space. I have had the pleasure of being able to work with her. She has been my finance director, and so she knows her stuff. She is talented, she is empathetic, she's gifted, she's an expert. And if you, oh, somebody's saying they can't see the main chat. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. We'll make sure that anything that we post in the main chat, you will hear from us live. So thank you for letting me know, Jessica. But Kim is a phenomenal, phenomenal executive who has worked in, like I said, finance, tech, and also in the nonprofit space. So Kim, I'm going to give you an opportunity to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, I I have an interesting background. Way back in the day, I feel like one of those people now. I've turned that age, right? Like way back in the day when I started my career in 1922. I started in the financial industry, and so I came up in the financial industry, and I worked for several credit unions. I worked for a couple of banks. I worked for a trading floor. I worked for a fintech company.
Mm,
And throughout all of those spaces, I actually came up as a business continuity professional. So, like, my background was in finance, but it was specific to operational improvement for
mm,
disaster and business continuity planning. And so as I came up through that, like, I realized, hey, I have this really great ability to take what people are saying to me and putting it into a process and speaking between them and tech as the liaison between. Because as we know, most of us know, when you have like a bunch of engineers sitting in front of a bunch of traders, investment traders, they do not speak the same language, right? What they hear is blah 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 blah. Insert me. So uh at the height of COVID, I actually decided, yeah, I'm done. I'm burnt out. I can't do
mm,
business continuity and disaster recovery anymore. So, my late 40s, early 50s, I made the bold decision to go after the tech industry. And so I went after the tech industry, and I entered into it as a senior business manager specific to finance and budgeting. And so I I started my career in operations, yeah, as a business manager for Microsoft, and the ride has been absolutely crazy, right? And I at first I was really nervous. I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know that I can do this because I'm playing on a different field, and
mm.
a lot of imposter syndrome overtook me. And then probably 6 months to 9 months into it, I realized all of my skills translate and make me the SME in most of the rooms that I sit in. So
Nice.
that's my
Nice.
background.
So this is the fun part. We're just going to talk. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and it's a
Yeah.
conversation. And actually, Kim, your introduction leads us nicely into your origin story because that's what I wanted you to share with folks. Like, what led you into the space, and specifically, can you share with us how did your background in finance actually shape you to move into the chief of staff space? Because you kind of touched on it, but I'd love to
Yeah.
have you share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So how it helped me transition, right, is I realized that I had this superpower that most chief of staffs have, but they don't have the details of it, right? Like, most chief of staffs, they understand budgets, they understand finance at a very surface, somewhat deep level. Um, but I because I grew up in the finance world, I understand it at a much deeper level to like trending and forecasting and uh, commitments and like all of that. When you say all of that stuff to an executive, they're like a trader talking to a tech person. They're just like, just
Mm,
give me the bottom line, right? And so my first, like I said, my first 6 to 9 months at Microsoft, like I really struggled with how am I going to help this? And as I started to go along, I realized that I was thinking too small and I needed to broaden it to say, oh, I am the strategic financial planner in this room for all of these people. And once I
mm,
put that in my head, everything switched. So
nice. And you said something interesting. You said that you were thinking too small.
oh
What is it?
yeah.
Tell me what it meant. Like, what does it mean when you say you think too small? Because I think a lot of us kind of struggle with that. Because when people think about being a strategic operator, they're thinking about a chief of staff, and it's, well, you're doing everything, all these things, but before you can really catch it holistically, like you do need to piece things together. But how do you evolve from thinking too small into more of that holistic thinking?
Yeah, so for me, what it was I I built my own four walls, right? I was like, I'm specialized in finance and budget. That's what I do. I do that
Mhm.
9 to 5, 4 days, 5 days a week. That's what I do. That's my special power. And it wasn't until I realized that although that was my superpower, that wasn't the four walls that I needed to stand in, right?
Mm,
I could do communications because a lot of times what I was doing is I was actually ghostwriting the communications for the executive to his senior staff saying, here's the budget, here's the numbers, blah, blah, blah. So I realized communications done. I was the one that was setting the rhythm of business for what it
mm,
looked like for finance and our annual budget review and our monthly cadence. So there were those pieces. And then the one that so I kind of looked at it instead of saying finance was my four walls, the four walls became communication, strategic partner,
yeah.
leadership, and rhythm of business, which
Hmm.
included finance, right? And the door was finance. That's the avenue that I took to walk into it. So
Nice. Nice.
yeah.
You know what I think is interesting about what you say is, so you're talking about how you moved into thinking like a chief of staff, a strategic partner. Um, what do you think are some of the misconceptions that people have about the chief of staff role? Because again, like with you, you said, I'm the finance person, so that's all I'm going to focus on. But then when you started thinking very holistically about what impact you were delivering, it opened up the world to you, and you're like, oh no, even though I have the finance slant, there's all of these other avenues that I'm touching,
Yeah.
which, so share with us, like, what are some misconceptions that either you had or you found that people have about this role stepping into it?
Yeah. So I think most of us hear this a lot, but we don't really consume it and process it, right?
Mhm.
So the number one thing that pushed me was I had a great a great leader. I'm gonna call her a leader because there's managers and then there's leaders. I had a great leader who truly believed in me and mentored me and pushed me to like hit those boundaries and push beyond them, right?
Mm,
And because I was able to do that in the finance slant,
mhm,
she recognized that she could just say, I want you to go and do this, run with it, and then come back to me. And when I would go back to her, what she would say to me was, you realize that you are doing a chief of staff duty. Like it may have a slant to finance, but you are doing the role that I do on a daily basis. Right. And she would continue to say that to me to where I started to believe it. And so the advice, like, it was the weirdest thing. Like, it was just, it was like I just woke up one day and I was like, yeah, I'm the chief of staff. Like, that makes sense. Right. Like, I've been doing
mhm.
this. it's like what you do in the morning when you get up. You get up, you take a shower, you brush your teeth, you drink your coffee, tea, water, whatever. You get your keys, you drive into work, or you walk into your office at home. And so, you know, a lot of times what I think happens to us is that we are our own worst enemies, and we don't
Mhm.
seek out people who mentor us or who push us to our boundary. Like we just sit. I know I just sat comfortably in my little box. And it
Mhm.
wasn't until I gathered the right mentors and the right people to be around me to help me realize what I was doing. So that was my journey.
Nice, nice. And I like that you said that you were pushed beyond your boundaries. I think
Yeah.
that's for me, that's the thing that's always been so important is if I feel like I'm too comfortable, and I like being comfortable. So
Yeah. Yeah, who doesn't?
think nice about being able to sit in a space and you're like, yeah, I'm good. But then you want to push yourself beyond that boundary and see what else can I do? And so, uh, was there ever a point where you realized I'm a strategic partner and I'm just not supporting the business, but I'm actually being very um, intentional about the connections that I'm making and the things that I'm putting out there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I can actually pinpoint the moment
Oh,
that my mind switched and said, "You're a strategic partner." So it was my second budget cycle at Microsoft. And so for a year, I had been building relationships with senior management and my executive and his team. And I I was in the midst of the second cycle, and it
mhm,
was like the last couple of weeks where the budget was coming together. We were talking about we were talking about getting together for the roadmap, and so I went to this meeting prepared with all my numbers, and in my head I was just like, okay, I got the numbers, I'm good. When it's my turn to talk, I'll just talk and then I'll just go, right? Like that was that was my process. And it was probably like a 3-hour meeting, and I was sitting there, and they were talking about the roadmap, and they were saying, "Oh, we're going to prioritize this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this." And all of them looked at me and said, "Kim, based on what you've done with the numbers in the budget, how do these top 5 projects fit into that budget?"
wow.
And I realized, like, the moment was very empowering,
Mhm.
and at the same time very, "Oh crap, now I have to, like, am I gonna do the right thing? Am I gonna say the right thing, right?" And, like, it just came natural to me. I just said, "Yep, these things make sense here. Here's where we're gonna have to cut." And I was talking to them like I am talking to you. And that was the moment that I realized, oh, I no, I am considered a strategic partner. I'm more than just a person that does budget.
You know what I like about what you just shared is, in that moment, you're having conversations with your peers. So these leaders are your peers, even though
Yeah.
you're providing something to them, and they look to you for your recommendation, they look to you for your expertise, and you
Yeah.
had done the work. Like you had prepared.
Yeah.
As staffs, we do so much work in the background, making sure that we understand contents, making sure that we've talked to the right people, making sure that we see what is trying to be achieved and trying to feel very comfortable in our own skin. And you had done all of that work. And so when it was time for you
Yeah.
to show up,
Yeah.
you showed up
Yeah.
and they were able to rely upon you. And my hope is that the team at that point also realized this is our expert. So I'm not going to pop in and say, well, Cam, I think you're wrong because I've done my own research. No, we have our expert here. This is our peer in leadership. And so
Yeah.
we're trust that she's done enough due diligence because at the end of the day, what that team is trying to do is have an outcome to a business initiative or business initiative, and you're the person who's going to help them with crafting what that narrative looks like. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly enough, my first budget cycle there, right? Like I came in and like soon after, like they were well into the first quarter of their budget because it
Yeah.
runs July to June, right? And so they were
Mhm.
well into their budget. And my first cycle, that same leadership team, they they tested me. Like they pushed and they prodded and they did disagree with me on things and they did do it to a point where just to see where my push points were, right? And
Mhm.
and, and unfortunately, to some extent, I look back at that moment and I recognize that how I handled it at that moment wasn't 100%. It probably wasn't even 80%, right? Because I
Okay.
became flustered. I became, oh my gosh, they're testing me. They don't think I know what I'm doing. Like all the things went through my head. And
Uh-huh.
at that moment, I had the choice in my first budget cycle to say, okay, well, I give up and I'm just going to do the bare minimum, right?
Yeah.
But or I have the choice to say, uh, budget cycle happens every year. So the next time I show up to this, I'm going to be ready. They're going to know me and they're going to understand that they can't push me anymore, right?
Right.
But the most important thing is I made sure that between that first meeting to the second meeting, I had regular cadence with them. I talked
Nice.
to them about their budgets. And so it wasn't just like, okay, you have one meeting and now you have another and you trust me automatically. Like I had to put the work in, right? And the
Nice.
second one went much better. So
Nice. Nice. So, what I really wanted to dig in with you, because we are talking about the finance view,
sure.
we were looking at everything holistically. But being a finance director, what did a typical day look like for you?
Uh, yeah. So that's an interesting question. I think a lot of people when they think of people who do finance, like their first image that comes to them is like this individual who sits behind a desk with huge piles of paper and they're just like on a little 10 key calculator going
Yep.
or they're, on a spreadsheet. So the typical day that I did was I literally would sit down at the first of the week and I would plan my week, right? I would make sure that every 2 weeks I was meeting with my senior management team, right? So every 2 weeks I was checking in with them. And on the
Mhm, mhm,
off weeks, I was checking in with the executives skip levels, right?
mhm,
So I have to think how. So I was the executive and his staff every other week, and the level below the senior staff on the off
mhm,
weeks. And so I would go into that meeting. We would have a brief discussion about, hey, are you tracking on, are you tracking on your budget? I see that you're overspending in these areas. I see that you're running a little bit hot. Can you kind of tell me what's going on so we can make sure that we allot different things? So I would get that out at the first of the week, right? And
mhm,
then the second half of the week, I always made a point, like on Fridays, I would always make it a point to learn something, take time to read a book,
Oh,
take time
nice.
to increase my knowledge. And then like on Thursdays, what I would do is I would take time to make sure that my trend and forecast was exactly where it needed to be.
Mhm,
And I would help the rest of the operations team pick up where they maybe were overwhelmed that week. So I always made sure that my week
sure.
was really well planned out. I
Mhm,
think I think what the difference is with me is because I've always dealt in numbers and I've always dealt with logical 1 + 1 = 2. It was just easy for me to do a schedule like that.
mhm,
Now I don't think that that's the case for every chief of staff,
sure.
right? Because as soon as I got into the role of chief of staff, that changed drastically. 'Cause you're like, "Oh, now I have to take care of this executive who may be panicking because something's blown up and they just barely found out about it, right?" And so I had to shift a little bit where I would help mitigate anything that was happening within the team, but I would
Mhm.
also make sure that if at any point along those conversations, if they said, hey, this is happening and now we're going to have to spend X amount, how does that affect our forecast? So that's why I'd always take that time the first week.
And then just so we can ground, because I'm obviously familiar with a lot of the terms that you're bringing up, but just for folks who may not be super familiar, can you explain what trending is and what forecasting is, why that's important for any
Sure.
business?
Sure. So the best way to describe it is when you sit down for an annual budget cycle,
Hmm.
right? A lot of times what people do is they're like, oh, well, we spent, $500,000 on this project last year. And so let's just add like a 3% contingency plan on that for in case the cost for vendors increase or in case product increases. And so a lot of times what executives do, like they just throw out random numbers. And they're like, so we got 7 million, so we're gonna just do this, this, and this, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, that percentage looks great. And so what my job is to take those numbers and start to forecast an actual track. So it
Hmm.
says, here's what you asked for. Here's what the actual contract was. So this is what we've committed to.
Hmm.
And this is going to forecast us up to where we're going to be on budget, or if we're going to be below budget. And if we're below budget, let's analyze it midterm and let's look at where we can spread that wealth to other groups, right?
Hmm.
So that's what a forecast is. Trend is year over year, right? So you're like, 1 year you get 5 million, the next year you get 6 million. And based upon the forecast and the actuals that happen on that annual, will
Hmm.
show you whether that organization or that group's budget
Hmm.
stays on point, trending as they spend every dollar, they trend
Hmm.
above their budget, they
Hmm.
trend below. Because what happens is if you are right on, right,
Hmm.
then a lot of people think, hey, that's great, right? But in the banking business, so I started out as a teller. In the banking business, auditors would come in and they would audit our teller drawers and they'd be like, no teller is 100% accurate all the time. And if,
Wow.
and if they are accurate 100% of the time, then either they're embezzling
Are
or they're not counting correctly, right?
you serious?
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. So so auditors and accounting, they look at those trends and they say, wait, this is weird. Why is it 100% all the time? Like, what are they doing? Are they floating money, or what are they doing? Right. So although it's a little bit counterintuitive, you do
Mhm.
kind of want to be, you do want to have a little bit of an overspend, right?
Mm.
Because what that says is, and that's kind of like a 5 to 10% over your
Mhm.
budget, right?
Mhm.
What that says is this is a group that spend their budget and have overspent wisely
Mhm.
what they've produced. And so by providing that trend and saying, hey, executive, your trend is that you have overspent by 10% year over year, but you're
Mhm.
not producing anything. You have no revenue coming in. So you
Mhm.
are a detriment to the company, right? You are a
Mhm.
drain on the company. So we need to turn that around. That's what trending is. And the
Mhm.
same happens with underspending, right? If you underspend, then they're like, why are we giving you money? Like, what are you doing? You can't just hoard it. It doesn't go year to year. So
Right,
that's
right.
the differences.
That's wild. So thinking about all of that, when you are looking at budgets, what's your approach on how do you balance, like if you've got a short-term budget and it's got its constraints, but you've
Yeah,
got this long-term vision that you've got to try to hit. Like how do you balance all of those? Because it sounds like there's so much that you almost have to inherently know to be able
sure.
to accurately balance a budget. How do you approach that?
Yeah. So, you know, um, what's the saying? Plans best laid are never something along those lines, right? Plans less best laid, like, anyway, basically, what I'm trying to say is this. Like, you can make the best plan in the world,
Hmm.
and at some point, that's going to blow up. So,
Mm,
the way I approach it is a little bit different, and I would have to say that I'm a little more liberal leaning on the way that I approach budget, right? Because you have those who approach budget, it's like to the dollar, you don't spend over, you don't even like 1%, not over, not under. And mine is more when allocated budgets come out from upstream,
hmm.
I will immediately take that number and I'll take a percentage of that and set that aside as a contingency as we go through the budget, right?
Okay.
And then um, the first thing out of the gate is, I've already had meetings with senior management about what their roadmap is, what their top priority projects are, and those
Mhm.
are first funded. And then it just kind of goes down from there. And then at the end of it, you have this contingency, right? And this is
Mhm.
something that I do, which always is kind of a great thing to do because then your executive is like, oh my gosh, you're magic. And it's like, well, I'm really not. I'm just smart. So what it is I'm like after we do all of those big things, then I will generally meet with the executive and I'll say, okay, for your discretionary spending, here's all of the things that you wanted. We can meet that with a contingency of overflow for any emergency type travel or events
Wow.
that you want to have that's at 15% contingency.
Mhm.
And I do the same thing on the other side, which then gives the executive this, oh my gosh, I can do more. So what do I want
Mhm.
to do next? And so it kind of gets that creative flow back and forth going. So that's the initial. And then once that's set up, uh, I, those meetings that I set up, hey, how are you doing on that? Just a simple
Mhm.
conversation. And hey, this is what I'm seeing as a trend. Is that really where you're going? Why is this happening? We need to scale back. So let's scale back. How can we do that? So it really it comes down to two things. Pre-planning at the front, making sure that
Mhm.
that is solid. And
Mhm.
then during the cycle, making sure you just have a cadence of checking through with them. Yeah.
And so addressing the short-term ask, so you're meeting regularly, and then how often are you reviewing that long-term vision? Is that something that's happening on a yearly basis, a quarterly basis? Like, how do you do
Yeah.
your balances with that?
Yeah. So with the business line level, I do it quarterly. With
Okay.
the executive and his senior staff, I do it twice a year. So mid quarter
Mhm.
and in. Generally, I like to touch base depending on the size of the organization, right? Like I like to touch base with the executive a little more frequently than just
Mhm.
every 6 months.
Mhm.
Um, I like to at least meet with them once a month and say,
Yeah,
hey, here's
sounds
here's the numbers. So
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I do it.
But right now, everybody's budgets are tight. Everybody,
Oh,
I would say across industry. I know at least for us at Microsoft, budgets are always tight. So what's your approach to dealing with tight budgets and people are still asking for, well, I want the same thing that I got last time. By the way, I want a little bit more. Because they never ask that.
yeah.
Never ask that question.
Uh, yeah, it's like it is a difficult thing.
Yeah.
Um, it it is one of those things that as an individual, especially a finance person, because money is it's very weird for people. Like
Yeah.
it's hard enough to say, hey, I want to raise, but
Hmm.
it's even harder when you are expected to deliver a certain something and you have to go ask for money, knowing
Yeah.
that like there's just anxiety across the board with it. So something that I like to do is when I'm starting to have those conversations, I start them very early in the budget cycle
Hmm.
so that it's not like this big surprise, right? because the like I did 3 budget cycles at Microsoft, and what ended up happening is every budget cycle they're like, you gotta cut 15% out
Wow.
every time. So immediately when I'd hear that, I'd immediately tell all of the individuals. I'd write a communication, I'd get it approved by my executive and say, just so you know, 15% off the top of what we had from last year. We need to strap down.
Yeah.
And you always have like that one person that's like, oh, that doesn't pertain to me, right? That doesn't pertain to me. I'm special. And you're like, hey, I would love to live in your world, but we're gonna live over here for a minute. And
Yeah.
those are hard conversations, but at the end of the day, what ends up happening is that as a finance person, I always have to put my shield on that is a little bit soft, but still has a boundary that
Yeah.
says, I get that you think that you're special, but here's the ask. Let's
Hmm.
see how we can compromise. I'm going to give you a couple of solutions. You're going to talk about those. We're going to meet over the next couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
Never out of the gate do I say, nope, you can't have that. You're up in
Yeah.
the night. I may think that, but I never go into a meeting like that.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, and
So,
that kind of lends to, so one of the things about working in the chief of staff office is your ability to influence, your ability to be a
mm,
leader. And I was actually going to ask you the question, like, have you ever had to say no? And how did that go?
mm,
And for me personally, when I've been able to observe you, you are a masterful person when it comes to pivoting or reframing when somebody asks something. And I'd love
mm,
you to share a little bit more about when you have those moments where in your mind you're thinking, this is never going to happen, but how do you pivot or how do you change that so it doesn't come across as a hard no, but are there options? Like, how do you think
yeah.
about those situations?
So for me, I actually do all of my research up front before I meet with a person, right? Like I look at what their vendor spend is off of my trends. I look at, is there another group within the organization that is using a vendor that is similar? Is there cross-pollination that can happen with that? Is this a way that
Yep.
we can save, right? I'm gonna use an example of one time I had to say no. And we had 3 vendors doing similar things, right?
Ooh.
And my approach was, okay, I'm going to know what each of these do. I'm going to bring
Hmm.
those 4 individuals who manage those vendors together, and we're going to
Hmm.
have a discussion. We're going to talk about what each of those vendors do. And the interesting thing that happened is at first it was like competition alley, right? Like my vendor is better because they do XYZ and they do it to the T, blah, 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 right? And this is my demented side of me. I was like, I would just sit back and be like, go. Right? But the reason why I did that is not because I wanted to make it uncomfortable for them. I wanted to observe what was being said. Because
Right.
inevitably, when somebody is talking about their vendor and they're doing it with such passion, you can pick up bits and pieces, right? You can
Mhm.
pick up, oh, so this is what's different from this one.
Mhm.
And and what ended up happening in that situation is I was able to figure out what each of those vendors did, and I was able to do additional research and say, each of your vendors has a portion of this. Would
Sure.
each of you be willing to reduce your vendors and have a shared responsibility across where,
Mhm.
maybe this vendor does all of these things that all 3 of you want, and we can plug and play these vendors instead of you having 18 and him having 2.
Right.
So, and it became more of a team effort, right? Like they were like, "Oh, I'm in it. I've got skin in the game now." So,
Wow. Nice. Uh, so that really leads to being able to work without necessarily having formal authority, because I'm thinking in
mm,
your experience, you've not always had a team. And so you were
no,
probably an individual contributor. You're
yeah,
managing these super large budgets for these
yeah,
cross functional teams. and all of them have their own agendas, and
Yep.
sometimes people come together, but there are times where they don't even know how to come together because they're so hyper focused on their world. So how do you influence without necessarily having the formal authority, but you still have to get the work done? Like, what are the things that you do?
So, like I said before, I had this amazing mentor. Actually, I
Mhm.
had a couple of them. And the first thing out of the gate that they all taught me was use your executive's name sparingly,
Gotcha.
right?
Mhm.
Stand in your own power as the SME for whatever you're talking about.
Right.
I didn't understand that at first. And then as I exercised it and I practiced it, I understood why it was so important, right? Because the trust that was built between those people,
Mhm.
they knew that I wasn't going to just automatically throw that card down and be like, we're done.
Yeah.
Instead, it was more of a, I get it, but I hold the numbers and I need this to come in here and I need you to help me. Like I would bring them in. This is what I need. And if it got to a point where it was a stalemate,
Mhm.
that's when I would throw down the
Mhm.
the exec's name and say, okay, we're just gonna have to have him make the decision. Like
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
I used it very sparingly.
Gotcha.
And that, although I didn't have the authority, it gave me the power to stand in my own knowledge.
Mm.
It was great.
That's
So
nice.
I
Nice.
thank my mentors for that.
And I think the thing that I really like, because I've been given the same advice too, is
Yeah,
depending on who your executive is, you're not that person, but you represent that person. And so understand what that means
yeah,
and protect that, because there are going to be moments where that is the card that you have to draw, but you don't want to draw it because now you're putting somebody on the defense. Hopefully, you've
yeah,
taken somebody on a journey with you. And so, if and when you have to draw that card, it's like, well, let's look at what our principal wants. What did she need? Do we feel
yeah,
like it's going to serve that need? It's still a struggle. All right. What do you think is the best next step?
yeah,
And then try to troubleshoot and troubleshoot, and hopefully it lends to positive conversations. Every now and then it doesn't. And
yeah,
then the audience is a little bit bigger because you're trying to get to the root cause of whatever you're trying to solve. But
yeah,
if you take people with you on a journey and they feel like you're a partner with them, because being a chief of staff for several years, sometimes I've had a team, but a lot of times I did not have a team.
yeah,
But I carried a lot of responsibility for my executive and his
yeah,
or her organization, and I had to represent them. And so I tried to use that name sparingly, but build at least my brand. So they were like, "Well, I know if it's coming from her, and she represents this person, right? Let's duke it out, but let's figure it out."
yeah. I mean, I always equate the journey to, hey, are you gonna want to be dumped in the middle of the ocean because you're going on a journey and somebody just pushes you out the door? Or do
Hmm.
you want to go to the journey and end up in Tahiti? Like, which one do you want? I mean,
Right?
me, I want to go to Tahiti.
Yeah. So do I. So do I. We should talk about that some more. But so something interesting that you also brought up is, so you talked to a lot of different types of executives, whether it was the very senior level executives or their direct reports. I'm guessing that you probably did a lot of coaching behind the scenes with these executives, especially from
Oh,
an operational perspective. Tell me, what was that like?
yeah. So my whole career, even outside of chief of staffing and business management, uh, was always specialized, right? Like
Hmm.
up until chief of staff, I was always specialized. And
Hmm.
so I always had to do the coaching to say, hey, if you do A, B, and C, here's the result of that.
Hmm.
There's regulations that are issues, here's your risk. And I always approach it from the point of, I'm going to tell you, like, I'm going to lay all my cards out and I'm going to tell you what that risk is. At
Hmm.
the end of the day, you're the responsible one. So I am not emotionally attached to this, but I am going to give you warnings, right? I am
Sure.
going to say, hey, And you're right, the coaching had to take place because an executive is not all-knowing in everything just because they're an executive. That's why they have
Right,
a staff underneath them, right? And so you
right.
just hone your business and your experience to help guide them through that. And
Yeah,
and 9 times out of 10, most individuals will actually be very grateful for that advice if it's approached correctly. If it's
yeah,
not, they're just like, "Go kick rocks," right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. So tell me, what do you think is the hardest part about being a chief of staff who has the financial oversight?
oh, a great question. Uh, I so it's the stress that comes with it, right?
Mm,
Because again, you're dealing with money
yeah.
and like one minor move one way or the other
Hmm.
can make or break you. And
Hmm.
so dealing with the stress of knowing what you're stating as a forecast or as a trend is
Hmm.
really important. And so you have to be on your game for that, right? And as humans, we're just not made to be perfect. We're just not.
Hmm.
So you walk this very fine line of I have to know what I have to know and I have to be on 100% of the time when I'm talking about this. And then on the other side, you have to be like, I have to embrace my human side. I have to
Yeah.
be okay with not being perfect. And those sometimes those cannot be on the same plane at the same
Yeah.
time. So,
Oh,
and that
well,
and that leads to burnout, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. I like that you were very real about the stress.
yeah,
It's
it's
very stressful, and we all feel it. And sometimes we know we feel something, and we want to bury it, and we shouldn't. Like give it a face, say what it is, call it out, figure
yeah,
out how you deal with it, figure out how you're going to move on with it, and if you feel like you are not capable of dealing with it on your own,
yeah,
lean into your network, whether you have sponsors, mentors, friends. I'm a huge advocate of therapy. And I love therapy. Lean into those resources where if you don't have the capability of dealing with something on your own because it's too much, because you don't want to get to the burnout, you have
yeah,
somebody who's outside who can say, hey, let's do this, or let's go for a walk, or whatever needs to happen. So,
yeah.
Kim, this has been an amazing conversation. So, folks, I hope that you have been enjoying this. We're going to move on to our QA portion here in just a second. Before we do, what I wanted to share with you really quickly is a reminder that these happen every single month. And so make sure that you have registered for them every month. Next month, my dear friend Karen Sargent is joining us. She has been a fractional chief of staff for over 15 years. So before it started to trend, she was a chief of staff. So make sure you've registered to join. You're again, as you can hear with the conversation with Kim, you're getting real world insights into the things that are happening every day. This isn't just us talking theory. It's actual things that are happening today. And then I would love to have you schedule a follow up with me. If you're curious about learning more about this space, are you already operating as a chief of staff and you want to be better, or do you want to step into that role? If you look at the chat, you'll see that I've got my link in there. Feel free to book a session with me so we can have a conversation. But right now, what I'm going to do is it's Q&A time. So I'm going to be looking into the chat to see if there are any questions for Kim. I still have a bunch of questions. And so while I'm checking the chats for questions, I'm going to be asking her some more that have come to light for me while we've been having this conversation. Let me check my Q&A to make sure nothing popped up yet. Yep, nothing yet. So Kim, so there's a lot of things that you've talked about being that financial person
Yeah.
um, for the chief of staff office. Um, Probably a question that I'm really curious about is how do you recover? Since we're talking about burnout, how do you recover when your strategy or your plan doesn't land? Because
Yeah.
we,
Uh, so I think it goes back to what I said earlier, which is, you know, you have to not be emotionally attached to your strategy, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a difference between being emotionally attached and just logically thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because the moment you become emotionally attached to it, then it goes from interactive to I've got to defend this. This is mine. This is who I am, right? And so that was one of the first lessons I learned is I can't be emotionally attached to it. When I start to see that happening, I do the strangest thing because I've always kind of worked from home. So I do the strangest thing where I go out, I put my feet in dirt, and I just like start to like plant or pull weeds or something for like 10 minutes
Right.
and then I come back. There is something about putting my feet in dirt that just, I don't know. And in Utah in the winter, it's really hard to find dirt. So,
Um,
you have to be creative.
well, you know
Yeah.
what the thing is? So I like that you said that because we all have our own ways of how we take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And the number one priority is identifying how do you do self-care. And if that's
Yeah.
something that works for you to kind of disconnect from the stuff to
Yeah.
get you so you're back in the mind frame and in a setting that moves you forward, that is amazing. I have four beautiful nieces, and when
Mhm.
they were younger, and this is at the height of probably some of the most stressful parts of my career, I would just want to hang out with them. I would just go and they would talk to me about the silliest things. And I forgot I had a phone. I forgot I had a computer. I forgot the world around me. And I was able to
Yeah.
immerse in their world. And so to this day, when people talk to me about what's your happy space, I'm like, I have a lot, but some of those happy spaces are with my nieces because I
Yeah.
get to be a part of their world, um, their craziness. Two of my nieces recently, oh my goodness, um, convinced me to go to a concert with them. And I don't know, it's some guy named Conan Gray. I don't know his music. I'm probably not going to ever download his music, but I'm pretty sure between now and that concert, that's all I'm going to hear. And I made the mistake and I said, I'm just going to be playing on my phone on the concert. And my older niece said, No, you're not. You're going to be singing and dancing with us. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to be singing and dancing with you. And so it's figuring out what is that place that takes you away from the stress. So then you kind
Yeah.
of center yourself and then you can step back into whatever the madness is and
Yeah.
then be about life and
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and be about your business. As we're starting to wrap up, I did have a couple more questions that I wanted to ask, but I know that you're involved in something really special, and I am grateful that you actually are my speaker at this time because we don't often talk about causes that are near and dear to us. And
Mm.
a cause that you're involved in is something that is near and dear to me. And I wanted to give you a moment to share with our listeners who've been here with us the whole hour. Thank you, everybody who you hung in with us. I appreciate it. I'm going to reach out to all you guys afterwards because it means so much, especially during the summer, to have people show up. But I want you to talk a little about the cause that you're involved in. And folks, if you are feeling in a generous mood, there's an opportunity for you to donate to a really, really good cause. And so, Kim, I'm going to give you the floor so you can talk about that and you can close us out.
Sure. So in 2023, my husband and I were both diagnosed with separate cancer diagnoses, 6 months apart.
Mm.
Mine was a stage 4, and his was a stage 2. And it was very weird, right? And what people don't understand about it is that as you go through this journey, there's the medical side of it. You just go, 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 go.
Mm.
And then afterwards, after all this stuff is done, you're just standing there going, now what do I do? And, a lot of people have good intentions and they want to say, "Oh, are you okay?" and all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of cancer patients are really angry, right? They're angry, but they don't want anybody else to see that. And so in Salt Lake City, in downtown Salt Lake City, there's this wonderful place called Survivor Wellness. And it is a nonprofit organization that takes care of cancer survivors and their caretakers, which is very unusual, right? So they have a support group, they do therapeutic, integrative wellness, so massages, Reiki, all that kind of stuff. And my husband and I got to land there. We got to breathe again. We got to scream our anger and do all the stuff. And so every year they have this wonderful event. It's called Survivors at the Summit that is dovetailed in with a campaign called Why I Climb. And this year, my husband and I are doing Why I Climb. And if you want to know about more about my story, I'll drop the flyer in. You can go out. At the very least, you can go out and read about the story and read about the organization. But at the end of the day, what a lot of people don't understand is that 1 in 4 individuals will be diagnosed with cancer. And of those 4 individuals, most will live below the median line of poverty. So they don't get
Wow.
the integrative stuff that they need to. And this place makes that happen. And my Why I Cry campaign, 100% of the proceeds goes to that organization. So I'll drop
Awesome.
that in right now.
Awesome. So like I said, if you're feeling like you would like to donate to this cause, I'm grateful that you shared that with us. Feel free if you just want to learn about it. If you have another cause that you're feeling that you want to donate to, just find something and uh, do something today. Kim, I want to thank you so much for being my guest
Thank
today.
you.
I learned new things again about finance. I You were amazing, an amazing partner to me as we work together. I don't like numbers. I don't like math. I don't like stuff. And I know how to do it, but I don't
Yeah.
like it. And so it's wonderful to have another set of eyes, another expert who this is their sweet spot, and to watch you blossom into the amazing chief of staff that you are today. I'm very grateful that I was on this journey with you. And so I'm looking at all of the guests who attended the call. I want to tell all of you thank you for spending an hour with us today. I hope that you got something out of it. I hope you learned something out of it. I hope it was interesting for you. I hope to see you next month. And I'm wishing you a wonderful rest of your day, a wonderful weekend. And thank you again for joining us. And I'll see you all in a month. Thank you again. And thank you
Bye.
again, Kim.
Thanks.